You sound good.
Good. It's a new year on Zoom, so just double checking. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I really wanted to just take an opportunity to give you a couple of brief regulatory updates, as well as recap some of the feedback we heard from our last EAG meeting back in November. So first, I'll start with our clean energy implementation plan. As many of you know, our clean energy plan is still in the adjudicative legal process with the commission being considered. We are getting closer, though, to hopefully receiving a decision sometime in the spring. And so I also wanted to make you aware, and we passed this along in November as well, that there will be a public comment hearing tomorrow evening at the commission at 6 o'clock. And so we'll put the details in the chat for all of you to have that. And then as part of that legal proceeding, the hearing on the clean energy implementation plan held at the UTC will start next week on Tuesday, and we'll run 1 to 2 days. And then the parties have an opportunity to file briefs after that, and then we hope for a commission decision shortly thereafter. So that's where we are from a CEIP perspective. And then the other update I wanted to bring back to you relates to our general rate case. And as many of you know, we reached a settlement with the parties, and then the commission made a decision on that settlement back in December. With me is Wendy Gerlitz. She's the manager of regulatory policy, and I asked her to give you just an overview of the general rate case outcome and also speak to some of the equity related provisions that really might be of interest to many of you. So Wendy, thanks for being here.
Sure, yeah, thank you. And I am having a little bit of trouble with my Wi-Fi connection, so hopefully everything will be okay while I'm presenting. I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly, so I'm happy to take questions at the end. But just wanted to go over some of the highlights of the general rate case settlement that we reached that the commission did approve in late December. So the first thing I wanted to just let you know is that with the order does allow Puget to raise our rates for electric and gas service. With the final order, the typical electric residential customer who uses about 800 kilowatt hours per month will see an increase of $8.73 in 2023 on their monthly bill. And another increase of $1.43 on their monthly bill in 2024. For gas customers, the typical natural gas customer who uses about 64 therms per month will see an increase of about 2024. They'll see an increase of about $1.33 on their monthly bill. So these costs.
Wendy, if you can hear me.
Are basically due also for recovery of about $3 billion in reliability and service upgrades that we've made over the last 4 years. So those were things that Puget has been doing that haven't been factored into rates until just now. So one thing that we're trying to emphasize as we get the word out about these rate increases is that Puget has a
Wendy, we are having some issues with your internet. We seem to be
number of
losing.
programs we agreed to in the settlement. Uh-oh, am I doing okay?
We're losing you. You're coming
a lot.
in now. We're losing you on the key points. So
oh shoot. Okay. If you
let's try that.
Wendy, could you repeat the point about, I think we actually lost you when you were going to emphasize the role of energy assistance. At least I think that's where you were going, and we lost you there.
Yeah, so tell me if this is better. Hopefully without my video, it might be better. Basically, I was just saying that as we're getting the word out about the rate increases, we're trying to emphasize to customers that we have a lot of programs to help them with affordability. So, we've already talked about a number of them, I think, in the EAG here, the existing programs. But what I'm going to do next is go over some of the new programs programs that we committed to in the settlement. Like hold up your hand so that I know. So a couple of the new things that we agreed to in the settlement that will help customers is Puget this year customers. That will be for eligible low-income and low-income senior customers. And we're currently designing that bill discount rate. Is my audio doing okay? I see Lucila's hand is up.
Yes, we've lost you again. You were beginning to
Oh
tell
no,
us
shoot.
about
Darn. Okay, how about this?
It's
Can I have like a 2-minute break to try to reestablish a better connection, and then I can see about continuing? Is there
I think
something you guys can do to fill
a
2
great
minutes?
idea.
Okay,
And
let me see what I can do.
accommodate that. Yes.
Okay, hold on one sec. Give me this a shot. Okay, thanks.
So Kara, either you can continue, or we can take a look at the chat to see how the comments are going for Susanna. You tell me how you'd like to proceed.
I'm happy to cover like my next slide around response to comments, and then when I finish that and Wendy joins back, maybe we'll be ready to go back to the GRC update.
That sounds good. Thank you.
And I can't sleep. There we go. Okay, perfect. Well, you read my mind. Okay, if you can go to the next slide. So we just wanted, like we do in every meeting, we wanted to touch on really and reflect on some of the themes and questions that we heard at the last meeting and how we're reflecting and incorporating that input. As you may recall, November feels like a long time ago now, but we had a really, really active and interesting discussion around the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, as well as a lot of good discussion around energy assistance and the bill discount rate program, which Wendy was starting to talk about, and hopefully when she gets back here, we'll have a better connection to hear from her. There were a lot of questions, and so we provided responses to each question in the feedback report, and that's linked here in the slide deck, and hopefully you all received it in your email recently as well for under the November 14th meeting. Related to IIJA, Nate Davern from PSE, who presented last time, will be back at our February EAG meeting to address some additional feedback on IIJA, and as we talked about, having him come back. And then we know there's a lot of interest and great questions around our energy assistance programs, and so we're looking to schedule like an office hours session with Suzanne Sassville, who you'll recall leads up some of those programs, and so hopefully we can find a time that works for that. So that's just a quick overview of what we heard from the November meeting. I see Wendy back, and I'm hoping that things will work out for her a little bit better. Thanks, Wendy.
Okay, hopefully this is gonna work. Can you hear me okay right now? Okay, let's keep our fingers crossed. Okay, so I was just going to start talking about some of the new assistance programs that we agreed to in the settlement. So the first one is a bill discount rate that we are currently working to design that should be implemented in the fall. And it will basically be a discount on the bill for eligible low-income and low-income senior customers. So that's something that can be combined with our other existing low-income programs. Another program that we are looking to kick off later this year is a pilot for an arrearage management program. And that is essentially a way to customize payment options for people who get behind on their bills so that the payment options can be unique to a particular customer. So basically a little bit more tailored payment program than what we currently offer. So we'll be working on that as well. Two other things that could help potentially with customer bills are variable time pricing programs and demand response programs, which both seek to give a price incentive for reducing usage during peak times when it's more expensive for Puget Sound Energy to serve customers. So it's sort of incentivizing people to cut their energy use at that time and passing the economic signal along to customers by allowing them to save on their bill. I also want to just quickly go over we had some equity related elements to the settlement that I would like to just highlight for this group because it was something we thought you'd be particularly interested in. So the first one is that we will be doing an electrification pilot that is looking at implementing technologies for customers to electrify their service. So it's basically switching over from natural gas to more intensive electric use in the home. And so this will be using things like heat pump technologies and other electric delivery systems. And in doing this electrification pilot, Puget has agreed that we will prioritize low-income customers, highly impacted communities, and vulnerable populations, and customers experiencing high energy burden. So those populations will be prioritized in the pilot, and specific incentives will be developed to try to help those customers in pursuing electrification in an affordable way. We're also agreed that we would include efforts to identify barriers to low-income customers, highly impacted populations, and vulnerable populations, so that we could better understand the challenges as we move through the pilot. We are working on the pilot right now. We just started because all of these things were conditions of something that was just approved in late December. So we're working to design all of these different elements right now. You know, for members that are particularly interested in some of these things, we can follow up with you. And if you would like to be provided more in-depth information, I'm sure we can provide more in-depth than what we're providing to the committee right now. Let's see, so a second equity related settlement item is that PSC has also agreed to do a pilot distributional equity analysis for the 80 megawatt distributed energy resources target that we have proposed in our clean energy implementation plan. So assuming that that 80 megawatt DER resource target is approved by the commission, then we would launch a pilot distributional equity analysis that will help us understand how we're measuring the benefits and burdens and where they're flowing from that 80 megawatts of resources. That pilot equity analysis would be filed with the commission, and it will be used to help inform a process that the commission intends to launch and which Puget has agreed to participate in, where we will have a commission-led process that will be looking at distributional equity analysis to kind of follow on from our pilot and say, well, what are the best methods for doing a distributional equity analysis? How are we really measuring where benefits and burdens are going? And then we would participate in that. And at the end of that process, we have committed that Puget will then request commission approval of a methodology that we would then use more broadly across the company. And in fact, in the settlement, we also agreed that we would use this methodology once it's established in two specific places for sure. One is our corporate capital planning. And that is the place where basically that guides all of our major investment decisions. So that is really something that's very comprehensive across the company. And the other place where we've agreed to use this methodology is in delivery system planning. And so that is basically how we get the electricity from one place to another, and it requires a lot of investment in infrastructure. And we would use distributional equity analysis methodology in that system as well for those planning systems. And then lastly, there are a number of different performance metrics that we have agreed to report on. I'm probably not going to read them all here, but we can maybe provide you a list of all the performance metrics, and I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm also cognizant of taking up too much time during the meeting. So let us know what you're interested in, and I'm happy to take questions, but that's kind of just a high level overview of some of the things we thought were in the settlement that this group would be particularly interested in.
Thank you for that, Wendy. It's always helpful to take questions, but I suspect that once we're able to provide maybe a list or something for the EAG to react to, that may be a better place, unless there are some immediate questions of Wendy around what she shared with the settlement on the rate case. And you can either raise your hand or use the chat. Just give you a couple of minutes to tee anything up based on what you heard. I don't see anything. Team, do you see anything? Just to thanks, you're correct. It is a lot of info. It was quite a process, quite a process. And so thank you, Wendy. I think I'll turn it back to Kara to summarize, and then I think we're going to Ray. And then Dennis, we're going to get you on deck as well for the final part of this segment. So Kara?
Thank you, Rose. I think I did my summary on feedback when Wendy had to jump off for a little bit. So I think we're going straight to Ray, unless someone else has something for me, but I think that's right.
Yeah, I just wanted to leave enough room to close, but we'll move over to Ray Outlaw, who's the manager of communications initiatives. And a part of the year ahead is speaking to the topics that we'll undertake, both emerging and otherwise. So welcome, Ray.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. If we can go ahead and go to the next slide, it's good to see everyone again. So the slide includes a list of topics that we anticipate bringing to you during the 2023 calendar year. I want to start by saying it's not a final list, it's just a starting point. And there's another slide that will have a few more topics as well. We shared this with the steering committee as we work with them to find ways to really fit all of this into the calendar year. And so this list is evolving as we speak. The first column just describes the topic and notes if that topic might be recurring. And as I go through these a little bit, I'll explain what that means by recurring. And the second column indicates if we formally committed to discussing the topic with you. And the use of the word commitments, those can originate in a number of different places, such as the CEIP or through the recent GRC settlement that Wendy was talking about. And then the final column provides an estimate of the length of engagement. How many meetings essentially would we need to bring those to you? So I know we're probably already a little short on time, but I'll go through this list. So the biennial update, as we've mentioned before, 2023 is our biennial update year. We're reserving the better part of the summer, so May, June, July, primarily for talking about the biennial update with you. We'll have more details on that as we get closer. The second is the public participation plan. We plan to introduce that concept to you at the February meeting and then have a more detailed conversation in March as we need to submit an updated P2 plan to the commission in the summer of this year. We also need to continue to talk about clean energy programs. The DER, DR teams presented to you recently, late in 2022, and they'll be coming back to talk to you more in 2023 about new programs, how they roll those programs out, what kind of engagement they need to do, how they prioritize named communities, et cetera. In the fall of last year, we brought the delivery system planning team to you and talked to you once and introduced that concept of delivery system planning. They plan to come back later this year. That's noted as TBD because we're not quite sure exactly what the structure of that, would it be one or multiple meetings or some other concept, so more details to come. We've already talked about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Nate will be back with us next month to talk about that in greater detail following up from our last meeting. The CEIP equity assessment is a concept that we've shared just at a high level with you over a couple of meetings last year. We'll be bringing back the results of that initial assessment, the draft results, and talking about those a little bit in the next couple of months. And then tonight, we're introducing the integrated resource planning process, which you have supported in ways that you may not realize until we dive into it a little bit later. But certainly on the electric side, the work that you've done to support the CEIP and the has assisted us, and we'll begin talking about the gas utility as well. Next slide, please. All right, and this next slide is a briefer one. These are emerging topics. So topics that may not require, but would benefit from EAG engagement. They often come from commitments that we make with the commission or in other spaces, as well as requests from you. And as they're confirmed, we move them obviously to the confirmed topics list. This list is relatively small, but we anticipate it will grow throughout the year. It certainly did last year as we were planning for future meetings. So the topics on here, Climate Commitment Act, again, not required, but something we would like to bring to you early to mid this year. Our ongoing DEI initiative. Troy is going to talk a little bit about that later today, and don't have certainty about how many meetings that might be, but certainly something we expect to bring back to you later this year. And then the bill discount rate program, we presented that to you and talked to you about that a couple of months ago. And we're looking at ways that we might be able to bring that topic back, even though we may not have the meeting space to fit that in. As I noted earlier, we have shared these topics with the steering committee and asked for their help on determining how we fit everything in. And I think if there are questions, I'd love to take them quickly. If not, I'll pass this to Dennis, who has an update that follows this from the steering committee perspective.
Thank you, Ray. Any questions of Ray? Okay, as I mentioned, we're going to have updates from our steering committee and also from the Equity Forum Planning Committee. But let's start with you, Dennis. And while you're teeing up, to thank those of you who committed to this extra time and work, we really do appreciate your commitment and your willingness to share additional time with us. So Dennis.
Okay. Well, it was a lot. It was a lot that Ray had to show with the coming 2023. A lot of meat right there with a lot of topics, and that kind of is driving some decision making within the EAG. First of all, like I said, there a lot of new topics and a growing palette. So what we're seeing is most likely going to grow as we move along, and also including the EAG requested and educational topics too on top of that. But anyway, one of the things that that jumped out at us with this is that there's an incredible amount of additional energy and focus that needs to come from the EAG, and that may drive some necessary changes to our structure, and that really is going to allow us to do, I think, what we do best, which is to really understand the programs, understand the needs, and understand the nuances of what we're trying to do to support PSC. And as we've talked about, that to do that, we need to be really in a deliberative space and the ability to really get in deep and discuss and come to a really solid understanding. So to do that, we're looking at some changes. One of the things, I guess, just a couple items before I get into that, was recognizing that we still wanted to maintain full meetings and also really not increase the frequency. So these changes would be done in concert with maintaining kind of our regular tempo. And these changes, like with types of through the steering committee, would maybe things that we'd have to review within the bylaws to do that. One of the tools would be committee structures. Because of having such a large palette, we're looking at, for example, like a standing committee that really is a permanent group with responsibility over ongoing topics. The other one could be a subcommittee, and it's formed to divide a large workload and is responsible for making recommendations to the larger group. So these things would come from within the EAG. The other one would be an ad hoc committee, which is a special or select committee. It has a limited period of time to address specific needs. And also the proxy, which is really a subset of EAG members, and would participate as a separate group or process as representatives of the committee. So I think there's just a number of different ways for us to carve up the topics we have, and we need to get, obviously discuss that further. But the plan committee structures, they, I think are more preferred than the ad hoc. And I think that also it allows us to be able to structure committees that people would like to participate in. So if there were topics that people felt, more knowledgeable or wanted to, participate in, they could gravitate toward those subjects. And obviously they would do the work and then report back to the EAG and ultimately leading to recommendations. The other thing that was said is that I think that from the steering committee is they'd still like support, facilitation support, administrative support from PSC with these things. So it would, help us as we move forward. Another thing is that if we had specialized presentations, they should be recorded for the full EAG to review. So that would be, more information for the group. And another topic, that came up was the topic of compensation. And that since more time is being spent to prepare for meetings or being involved in, in preparing to be more effective and efficient in these meetings or even subcommittees, that compensation should be available for that. And anyway, I guess really the next steps is really to come up with some formal recommendations on committee types, through our governance and necessary changes to the bylaws if necessary. So, I think that again, going back to if we're going to be able to really come from a space that we have in the past couple of years to really focus on understanding the issues, then we need to use some, novel in some cases, or, tried and true approaches with different types of committee structures to get to the core of those issues and bring that back to the larger group so we can make proper recommendations back to PSC. Any questions?
Thank you, Dennis. Very helpful updates, but this is the direction. There's a item in the chat that I saw. I thought it was from, it is, around the GRC and getting some additional information. But that's not related. I'm sorry, Dennis, not related to your update on the steering committee. C is offering her thanks for a great update. A lot of work has been undertaken. Your steering committee has been meeting regularly and tasked with helping to solidify structure. So we'll be very interested in further information on your recommendations. Sharon, I just saw you offer something, move to standing or subcommittee. So you support that as a direction. And I think from a governance standpoint, as you say, Dennis, you have lots of options. You can design something that the EAG is most comfortable with. So thank you for that. The other committee or the other subgroup of the EAG that we've had has been working on the equity forum, and looking to D'Amico for an update as a representative of that group. So welcome, D'Amico.
Good evening. Good evening. Okay. As stated, I'm part of the Equity Forum Committee. And for those who don't know, there is a committee that is in the works of planning a equity forum. This forum, which I believe that provide us the opportunity to really get a good scope on equity and how it relates to energy, to receive information from different stakeholders and different leaders as it pertains to energy, and which would drive the conversation, how we should how this the EAG should inform PSC in regards to equity and energy. So we have a couple goals here. One is to collect feedback on a definition of equity and energy equity drafted by the EAG. So there's been a lot of conversations that we've had in regards to establishing a statement or definition um, as it pertains to equity. And just based on our talks, it looks like we're going to have a definition that's really aligned with the definitions of equity used by other communities and organizations and PSC service area. So this will be a collective effort in regards to establishing that statement and that definition. And also to the definition, equity definition will remain flexible and contextual as well. So I believe that our definition will be based on collectively our experiences and based on the current situation as it pertains to energy and equitability. So goal number 2 is understand the challenges that community-based organizations and communities face related to clean energy. So that's our second goal, is to understand, really get a good glimpse of the challenges that um, the CBOs are in the communities they represent. What are the challenges they face? And I believe us as a collective group can provide that information as we represent a well-diverse communities and demographics, and we can really get a true understanding of what we need to address during this forum if we understand those challenges and those obstacles as it pertains to what we've been talking about in the past as it pertains to accessibility, affordability, and accountability.
That's very helpful. So we have 2 goals established for the forum. I've had the opportunity to participate in a couple of those meetings, and you've discussed a variety of formats as well, from workshops to other suggestions within your group. So D'Amico, I suspect that we can expect some additional feedback from the planning committee and perhaps some specific guidance as we work through the planning going forward.
Correct. I believe there's some more items here on here we go. On the format, there's been a lot of discussion about the format, and we have agreed that the best format would be a hybrid type of setting where, and that's due because we represent a large territory and of the Puget Sound. And so hosting a hybrid meeting will probably be more beneficial. That will consist of breakout room discussions, and we will have a variety of workshops, there were talks of having even organizations that have been involved in this type of format already, as far as having an equity forum. And so we will send discussion questions via survey to invitees who are able to attend as well. So our audience, what we're looking at is CBOs, the community-based organizations invited by EAG members. So all of us that are here on the planning committee and we're still having talks about, how large. We still want to keep it kind of small. So there will be some discussion about how many organizations will be invited and how many per member would invite each community-based organization. So our timing, we're looking at the anticipated time is during the fall of 2003. We think that gives us enough time to plan. We're starting now to really put together really a good forum and a very informative and something that's really going to be impactful. So we're looking at the fall of 2003, probably early fall 2023. And so like I stated earlier, we want to keep the event small and focused on communities or CBOs and EAG members that work with and represent them. So as we move forward, the next steps, there's one more slide. We want to also to confirm this week who is participating in the planning committee of the equity forum. That's very important as we're really establishing, our format and our timeline and the topics that we want to discuss, that we have those that are committed to this committee. And I believe I can be corrected by, I don't know if that could be established by email or here in the chat, of those who are willing to commit to that committee. And the next steps also is to draft an equity statement and gather feedback from the full EAG members. So we're going to, as a committee, is to form and draft that equity statement and bring it back to the EAG for feedback. And we're going to consider potential guests with expertise on energy equity to speak or host a workshop. So there were some names that were thrown out in some organizations as far as who we think, would bring a wide scope of expertise and provide workshops or even be a guest speaker. We're going to coordinate with full EAG and PSE community engagement team to develop an invitation list for CBOs and potential guest speakers. So also that forming that partnership with those PSE community engagement team members, because they're really out there, boots on the ground, on the front lines, and they really have a really good understanding and scope of the organizations that would benefit from this forum. All right, and it looks like the poll has gone out for those who want to participate and commit. So align with PSC's efforts to develop and implement an organizational definition of equity. So we kind of spoke on that earlier. So does anybody have any questions or?
So you should have a poll before you to determine whether or not you would like to sort of officially be a part of this planning committee, so that we have a sense of who will be working, and then the members can decide how to distribute responsibilities. I heard a question, I think.
Mhm.
Will someone have a question?
I have a question. So I'm wondering, for existing planning committee, do we have to complete the poll?
I don't think so. Well, I guess you should, because that if you want to continue, which we certainly hope you will, I think it would be helpful just for sake of an accurate poll.
Oh, I think it's gone now.
I'm sorry, I did close it. But if whoever did not respond in the poll, if you could either send me, Lucila, a direct chat or put it in the chat box, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucila. So once again, Dennis and D'Amico and members of both the steering committee and the Equity Forum Planning Committee, thank you for your efforts, and we appreciate this update. I'm going to quickly turn the microphone back to Kara for some additional updates, specifically around resource planning. Kara?
Thanks, Rose. Yeah, so tonight we're gonna talk a little bit more about how we plan for both the electric utility and the gas utility. And in our conversations with you all so far, we've been really focused on the electric utility, given that the clean energy transition under CETA is really focused on the electric sector. And so our work with you has been focused on the electric side and thinking about how we make this an equitable transition and ensure that named communities are benefiting. So we do want to begin a conversation with you all about our gas utility tonight as well. And that's an area that several of you have expressed interest in the past, and just learning more about how our gas utility works. So, but as a starting point, we thought we would begin with the basic elements of both businesses. So if you could turn to the next slide, thank you. So starting at a high level, as an electric utility, we provide electricity for heating purposes, cooling, lighting, cooking, and really just the general power needs that our customers have. And as many of you know, our electricity isn't just generated from one source. We really have a number of different sources. We have coal-fired generation, which we're transitioning out of, thankfully, under CETA by the end of 2025. We have natural gas-fired generation. We have hydroelectric power, the power from our dams, and we have renewable energy sources such as wind and solar. And then for our gas utility, we provide gas to our customers to use for their space heating needs, for cooking and water heating primarily, as well as space heating. And so the gas we provide is primarily supplied by natural gas, and we're starting to add modest amounts of renewable natural gas, or RNG, in our portfolio as well. And we're piloting hydrogen as a source. So it's important to note that we plan for the use of natural gas in both utilities, and they're really considered separately in each. So you may hear us talk about natural gas for the electric utility, and that's really when we're generating power using a natural gas fired facility. And then if you hear us say the gas utility, we're really talking about gas uses, those on the right side of the screen. So it may be helpful to think of the gas utility as the place where the gas is delivered directly into customer homes and businesses for direct use, and then gas in the electric utility as a generation source, such as a natural gas fired generation facility. So if you can go to the next slide, on the electric resource planning side, you may recall we began discussing our integrated resource planning process with you all at our September meeting last year. And we had a really robust conversation that we appreciated around how customer benefits could be considered and applied as a portfolio benefit analysis in our resource planning. And so since that conversation, we've done some more work on this portfolio benefit analysis tool. We hosted drop-in sessions in September and October that some of you were able to make it to, and with other interested parties as well were a part of that conversation. And they really gave us good feedback to help us refine our approach. And then we used this portfolio benefit analysis in developing our preferred portfolio. And our preferred portfolio for the electric progress report, which is part of our integrated resource plan, and we'll be sharing it tomorrow in draft form with the public. And then we'll be working to receive comments on the plan and reflect on that feedback and finalize the plan by April 1st. The progress report is really, on the electric side, is an important input for how we will approach our biennial CEIP update, which is the update we'll be preparing this year and filing in November. And we'll be consulting with you, as Ray went over earlier in the meeting on the topics. That's something we'll be consulting with you throughout the year as we build that biennial update. In terms of natural gas planning, we wanted to begin a preliminary conversation with you all today on the gas utility and how we might start thinking about equity from a gas resource planning standpoint. While acknowledging that we don't have a statute like CETA that provides specific equity guidance specific to the gas utility, while we don't have that, we know, consistent with recent guidance from the Commission, that it really is important that we continue to look for and apply an equity lens to all the work that we do at PSE, whether it's the electric utility or the gas utility. And so we really wanted to begin that conversation with you all this evening. If you could go to the next slide, please. This slide shows you at a high level the different kinds of resource plans that we prepare. There's the integrated resource plan, or the IRP, and it looks out over a 20-year time horizon, which, when you think about it, is a really long time, looking out at 20 years in the future for both the electric utility and the gas utility. And then we update that plan every 2 years. And the purpose of that long-range plan is really to identify the needs and resources for the utility over that long-term horizon. We don't make decisions in the IRP, but we do attempt to project out in the future what we think our load will look like, what our customers are going to need, and what resources may be available to meet that need. And then under CETA, we now have a 10-year clean energy action plan. It's filed with the IRP, and that 10-year strategy really serves as the analytical foundation for our clean energy implementation plan. And then last, you have the bar for our clean energy implementation plan, which many of you were deeply involved in helping us develop in 2021. It's a 4-year roadmap for our clean electricity plans. It includes specific and interim targets and lays out the types of actions the utility plans to take over that implementation period. So if you could move to slide 22, please. So when we prepare an IRP, there are a number of steps that we take. We gather data, a lot of very technical data, and we use that as we use our modeling tools to look at and model different portfolios. And at a high level, the data we gather is to help us answer a couple of fundamental questions. What resources are available to serve our customers and what they need, and where would those resources come from? And we think about and answer a lot of other questions, but for me, those are a couple of the overarching questions that I think about with the IRP. And when we look to answer those questions and other questions, we engage with interested parties around some of those questions and assumptions. We do it informally, and we also do it more formally through our advisory group processes. So from there, the next step is to identify and model different portfolios. And when I say portfolio, what do I mean? In an IRP, a portfolio is a bundle of energy resources that PSE evaluates to fulfill those customer needs. And so we test a lot of different assumptions in each portfolio as we try to learn the implications. So the cost implications, the implications for reliability of different combinations of resources. And this planning process has really evolved over time. Before CETA, resource planning traditionally took a least cost approach. So let's identify the lowest cost bundle of resources that will meet the customer demand that we're expecting. And now with CETA, that standard is no longer least cost, it's lowest reasonable cost, and that considers risk, and it considers the equitable distribution of benefits standard under CETA. So it's certainly been broadened, and it's not a least cost standard anymore. So to consider how we incorporate equity into our planning processes, for this electric progress report, we added a specific new step, and that's the portfolio benefit analysis that we talked with you initially in September, and we held some drop-in sessions to refine our approach. And really our goal of adding that step is to identify what's a feasible portfolio that has a diverse set of resources that can prioritize equity, create customer benefits while maintaining reliability and affordability. So it's a lot that we're trying to do there and to balance. We have been able to implement this process, I think, a little bit more readily on the electric side because we've been through this process now of developing customer benefit indicators under CETA that we're applying here. So I'll walk you through what the electric progress report process with this new tool has looked like this year, and then we'll talk more a little bit later about how we're beginning to think about equity in the natural gas planning context. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So in the approach for the 2023 progress report, there really are a few key principles that are really foundational to how we approach our planning work. For PSE, it's important that in any plan we put forward, we continue to be a clean energy leader in and beyond our region. And it's important to us that any resource plan we put forward fully meets our CETA obligation. It puts us on a path to be out of coal by the end of 2025, consistent with CETA, as I mentioned earlier, and on a path to reach 80% renewable by 2030 and the 100% clean standard by 2045. And as we've talked about before, ensuring an equitable distribution of benefits as we make this clean transition. We also believe that the future of power, looking ahead in the future, is going to be dependent on a diverse portfolio of resources, of non-emitting resources primarily, that will provide security and reliability for all of our customers. So we don't think the answer will be simple, like all solar power or thousands and thousands of megawatts of batteries. We think it's going to take a variety, a suite of diverse resources for us to continue to decarbonize our portfolio and meet our CETA goals, and to do it in a way that also keeps the system reliable, so that the system's reliable in all hours of the day. And that's something that we rigorously planned for. And then, of course, I'll mention it again, it's really important to us, of course, that any plan we put forward is working on that equitable distribution of benefits for all customers as we make this transition. So if we move to slide 24, last September, we began, as I mentioned, a conversation with you around this tool. And it was really to help us measure those potential equity-related benefits to customers in a given portfolio. And it built off of some work we initially started in the 2021 IRP. And we wanted to bring this back to you tonight because you really helped us get there. It was that initial conversation with you that helped us really think through, how do we continue to improve on this tool? We held those drop-in sessions. We really feel like we made some forward progress here. And then this tool we have implemented into the electric progress report, and then we'll be sharing those results and the tool as part of that work. And using the metrics from our Aurora modeling software, we were able to use a subset of the customer benefit indicators from our CEIP. And some of those are listed in the right-hand column as an example. And that let us compare how one portfolio may help enable more equitable outcomes, and then think about, well, what are the costs associated with A versus B? And really just to inform us in some of those trade-offs as we work towards identifying what may be the best preferred portfolio. So we see the methodology that you all helped us with as an improvement on what we were able to do initially in the 2021 IRP. And we just know that this work can improve even further as we learn more collectively about how to think about these metrics and apply them. And so we're really eager to improve on this for the 2025 IRP and for future CEIP cycles. So if you could move to the next slide, slide 25, I'll just, I'm going to pause. I've been going for a while, but I don't see any questions in the chat. So I might walk through this slide and see if there are more questions from there. But feel free to stop me, Rose, if you see one. So here on slide 25, I just want to talk a little bit more about how we use this tool with hopefully a tangible example. So this table shows a really simplified example comparing two portfolios. So we have let's say we have a blue portfolio and an orange portfolio. So the blue portfolio would be a lower cost portfolio that provides fewer customer benefits. And you can see that represented by the shorter bars on the right. And then we would have an orange portfolio that provides more benefits, like greater customer participation in DER programs or more clean energy jobs. However, the orange portfolio does come at a greater cost, which could translate to overall higher rates or bills for customers. That's of course without factoring energy assistance programs and some of the tools that Wendy talked about, but just globally, if the portfolio is trending higher, then those costs will need to be passed on in some way, and energy assistance is an important tool for us in helping address those that need the help the most. So in the IRP, we extended this type of analysis and looked at many possible portfolios. And so given the different portfolios we tested, we may find that one portfolio provides a lot of benefits in one category. So really high greenhouse gas emission reductions, but maybe fewer benefits in another category, like added clean energy jobs. And so this is a little outside my expertise, but we use what is called normalization and indexing process to really consolidate all the possible benefits, so we could have an overall measure of the value, which we call the CBI index. And then we can compare that index across the cost of the portfolio for all the different ones that we analyzed. And that gives us kind of a range or a spectrum of possible outcomes, each with their own trade-offs between the amount of customer benefits that we think will be provided and then the cost of doing that. And so we use this to give us to generally inform us in how we might make resource decisions on the type of programs that enable more equitable outcomes as we work towards that preferred portfolio. So if you could move to slide 26, this might be my last slide. So in terms of next steps, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be publishing our draft resource plan for the electric utility, which incorporates directly this portfolio benefits analysis work. We'll be doing that tomorrow, January 24th, and then accepting written comments on the draft over the next couple of weeks. And we can put some more information on that and the comment period in the chat for you. So that's what I had to share there. And then I think we're about to take a break somewhat soon, but after the break, we'll be starting the conversation with you all on our gas utility, giving you an introduction to how the gas utility operates. And Rose will introduce you to Troy Hudson, our new Energy Equity Director at PSE that we're so thrilled to have. And he'll talk to you a little bit about how he's approaching the topic of equity, not just under CETA, but more broadly for PSE as a company. So I've talked a lot. I will stop there and see if there are any questions for me that I can answer now or later. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you, Rose, for that generous introduction. And I'm excited to be here and excited by the opportunity. And I think my diverse set of experiences across PSE and prior to that in different sectors has prepared me well to provide the leadership necessary to get the job done. I will add to that the context for the Trinidad reference. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Guyana, South America, and I always remember my mom, poor single mother raising 4 kids by herself by being a servant for rich families, as the person I always want to make sure I'm paying attention to who's not in the room, because she will let me know if I don't live up to the standards and the expectations from her. I think one relevant role that I wanted to introduce prior that I had prior to PSE was Assistant Secretary for the Washington for the Economic Services Administration for the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services, where I managed welfare programs serving the poor in the state of Washington, who ironically tend to be single women raising children. So that's my background. So next slide. So you heard from Cara and Wendy in the updates about recent legislation, regulation, and our rate order that advance the transition to clean energy and that have extensive equity requirements. And those require a fairly robust response from PSE. And so I sort of categorize that in, I don't have a team yet, so I'll be building a team. And the responsibility will be to lead and manage compliance with those regulatory commitments that we've made, developing a 3-year strategy to operationalize equity across the enterprise, and then develop an equity framework that aligns equity with our key enterprise business and financial objectives. As I've delved into this and looked at a lot of the primary research out there, there's a sort of clearly identified set of things that you need to pay attention to as part of a framework. And from looking at everything that the Commission has laid out and that others in other parts of the country have put together, there's a certain consistency to those, which will be very empowering for us to sort of follow that path and get there. So pretty excited about that. Next slide. So, in this conversation, you have been focused in your work as an advisory group on the electric side of the business, as Cara said. And there's an expectation that the gas business will also respond to equity. So we have started doing that with the recent gas IRP, mostly to lay out how we plan to do that going forward. And then recognizing in the CCA legislation that, gas costs will affect historically marginalized communities, especially if those who have the capacity to switch and the resources to switch are no longer contributing, right, to the maintaining the current system. And then the settlement does include this targeted electrification pilot where we plan to prioritize highly impacted communities and vulnerable populations. So Wendy mentioned that that's a part of how this transition is likely to move forward. Next slide. So we've got the current gas IRP I mentioned, and I think that there's a link in the chat to some of that information. You know, a big part of the equity framework involves engagement and community engagement. And so that's the spirit in which we are introducing this conversation to the Equity Advisory Group. There are lots of lessons to be learned from the CEIP that will be applicable as we look at gas going forward. And then, you know, we are committed to continuous improvement as we go forward. Equity is a process and not a destination. So there will be opportunities to show measurable and quantifiable improvement as we move forward. Sometimes we will be required to set specific targets. Other times, you know, we will encourage our teams to sort of, you know, come up with, you know, measurable improvements that we can then capture and create momentum in moving forward. So this is a very quick, high-level introduction. I anticipate that I will be spending a lot more time with you going forward. And so, you know, there will be plenty of chances for us to have conversations about this. And I'm excited to get to meet and know all of you as we move forward. With that, I will see if there are questions that I can respond to currently. I will move forward and introduce Elizabeth Hosner, who is our Manager, Resource Planning and Analysis. And Elizabeth's going to shift the conversation to the introduction to the gas utility. Elizabeth's been at PSC for 16 years. Prior to that, she was at the Federal Department of Energy, and her area of expertise is in math and statistics. Clearly, I would have not gone to law school if that was a focus of mine. So with that, I will introduce Elizabeth. Take it away.
Hey, Troy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is.
And welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak on the gas utility today. I'm going to go through kind of some high level how we do planning for the gas utility. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is just a picture of our service territory. It looks at both the electric and the gas service territory and kind of where we overlap on both the electric and gas. So PSE, as you know, is electric utility. That would be kind of that yellow highlighted area on the map, but there's also the gas utility. We do separate planning for both gas and electric. Our gas utility overlaps about 50% of the service territory overlaps with our electric. So as we go through planning on both the gas and electric, we need to see where it's overlapping. There's also places where our gas utility overlaps with other electric utilities, or our electric utility does overlap with other gas utilities. This is an important piece as we start going down the path of doing some analysis on the electrification and some of these pilot programs of how this will interact between both electric and gas. Our gas utility is a little over 800,000 customers. That's in comparison to the electric, which is somewhere around, I think, 1.2 million customers. And the gas utility planning is a little bit different, as most of the pipelines are buried. There's quite a bit, many miles worth of pipelines going throughout the region to serve the gas system. So this is getting the delivery of the gas. We get the supply of the gas, and then this is delivered to customers where it's used in houses for furnaces or cooking, or used in commercial or industrial for their purposes. And so really on the gas side planning, it's about finding the supply, making sure we have enough supply of gas and fuel to serve the customer demand. And so that's the important piece we're looking for when we're looking at the gas planning. Next slide. This is really just a look at some of the gas basins where we're pulling gas from. So majority of the gas for the gas utility, majority is coming from Canada. We source gas out of what is northern BC. This is a gas supply hub called Station 2. It's a pretty big hub where we're getting gas out of northern BC. The other hub is from Alberta. But we also do source some gas out of the Rocky Mountains hub as well. So not as much, but it's all part of the important pieces of where the gas gets supplied from, making sure we have diversity of where the supply comes from. So if there's any disruptions somewhere on the system, we can pull gas from other places to make sure there's enough gas supply coming into the region and to supply all the customer demand. I think next slide, and if you do have questions, please let me know. So another piece when we're looking at the gas system is the storage. And so gas can be storage. This is an energy storage system. We can store the gas. So for example, during the off seasons, because winter is mostly our peak season with winter heating. The furnaces, HVAC systems, a lot of heating coming in the winter. That's the peak season. So what we can do is during the summer seasons, gas prices could go a little bit lower. So we can buy gas in the summer, store it, and then have it available for the winter seasons. And this helps with some of the gas prices that could go up in the winter and what we can be seeing with some of the pricings. And so there's several different storage locations that we have. One of our major storage is the Jackson Prairie storage, where most of that for the Pacific Northwest goes in. And so this is an important piece of making sure we have adequate supply for the gas system. Next slide. So when we go through gas planning, there's 4 important pieces we go through when we plan the system. So for gas planning, it's really making sure we have enough fuel supply to get to customers. This is very different planning than how we do electric system planning, where we need to make sure there's generation. Whereas on the gas side, we need to make sure there's fuel. This could be natural gas as fuel. This could be alternatives as fuel, like renewable natural gas or alternative fuels, but just making sure there's enough fuel supply coming to the system. And so in this, when we do the planning on the gas side, we have a very conservative look. We look at an extreme cold peak day and making sure there's enough gas supply to supply this cold peak day. And this helps make sure to maintain the system, maintain enough fuel, and maintain there's enough pressure in the system as well. So that's an important piece when planning the system and planning enough fuel. As I mentioned, the diverse transport of resources. This, like I said, is an important piece in planning. So if there's a disruption on one piece of the system, we have fuel supplies coming from other locations. So we can make sure to draw from other locations to make sure there's enough fuel supply coming in and we can meet that customer demand. The gas storage, this is like the Jackson Prairie system, or where we can store the gas. This helps to arbitrage against costs. And this also helps us to store up enough gas to make sure we're meeting those peak demands as well. So if suddenly demands can go up, we have fuel and storage, we can pull from that storage and still meet those demands. This happens when we get into these kind of very cold days, as we noticed happened just before the Christmas time holidays. There was some very cold days coming in. So this is also helpful coming into those days as well. And the last piece is actually regional cooperation. This is the Northwest Mutual Assistance Agreement. So all the gas utilities in the Pacific Northwest have come together in this mutual agreement. So in times of extreme needs, we will all join together to make sure there's enough supply coming to the system. So one utility does not have any specific failures. We will come together as a mutual agreement to make sure there's enough supply and we can maintain the system. I think next slide. If there's questions, please let me know. So as I mentioned, we do have natural gas is the main source of fuel coming into the gas system, but we are pulling in some renewable natural gas. There's a little bit of renewable natural gas starting to come to the system. It's known as RNG. It's a kind of a biofuel that we're exploring as possible alternative fuels to bring in with some limited supplies. And hydrogen is this new fuel that, or I wouldn't say new fuel, but we're doing some pilot exploration of how hydrogen can also be blended into the gas system as well. So this is kind of a newer pilots that we're looking at. Hydrogen is a possible fuel for alternative supply. It can come from many different resources. For example, if there's surplus wind or solar energy on the system when not needed, that can be used to create hydrogen. And then that hydrogen as a fuel can be stored as well. So there's different ways that we can kind of store energy through the system. And I do see a hand up. I think there's a question. Thank you. Okay, next slide. So some of the foundations, some new things coming in as we're planning for the gas system is the Climate Commitment Act. So this is some new requirements that came in and we are accounting for in our modeling process. And so as part of this, the Climate Commitment Act allows for some allowances, and we are modeling this as like a carbon price coming into the system and also meeting some of the carbon reduction goals. We also, as I mentioned, looking for kind of a future of a diversified portfolio, exploring renewable natural gas, exploring hydrogen as alternative fuel source to help decarbonize the system as well. And as always, it's very important to make sure we maintain the infrastructure reliability. As we have customer demand, we need to make sure we have enough supply to meet that customer demand. So as there's still customers on the gas system, we need to meet that. Next slide. So coming in, as I mentioned, the Climate Commitment Act is one of the new regulations we have. We also have the Inflation Reduction Act. So that was very new as of August of last year, and we were already mostly into our planning horizon, working on this plan for the 23 IRP. So we were only able to get a couple pieces of the Inflation Reduction Act into our analysis this time around. We do know there's more work to do. So luckily this is an iterative process and we'll have more opportunities to get more in. But as of right now on the gas planning, what we have is there was a production tax credit for hydrogen production that was put into this Inflation Reduction Act. So we've added that in as kind of a cost reduction to producing hydrogen as one of the fuel sources. So we've accounted for that. Climate change modeling, that is some really new work that has been going on this last year. It's been really great work that we've been doing. And we've been bringing in, we looked at, there's 3 different climate change models that came into the analysis. And this really worked to assessing not only average temperatures and how that affects our demands moving forward, but also that peak day temperature. So we do kind of that extreme peak day planning. So we're trying to model what's happening to these extreme peaks. And that is important as we make sure we have enough supply for the system. Looking at diversity of supply and these alternative fuels, that's these alternative fuels coming in is also new, coming into this planning. RNG is kind of a new resource coming in the explorations of what's happening with hydrogen. And this time around, we've done an initial electrification analysis as well. This is really looking at policies behind electrifying and how that will happen and the impacts to the electric load. So we're looking at reductions to gas loads and the demand moving over to the electric system. And so this is really where we've started trying to combine some of our gas work and our gas modeling and our electric modeling, and trying to put those together to see how it works together for this electrification. Because not only is it important to see what the impact will be to the gas system, but its loads moving to electric. And we need to also account for that modeling and how we will meet that demand on the electric side now with the increases in loads or demands. Next slide. And so through the modeling process, we have a public participation process. We have these public meetings, we take feedback, we do make adjustments from the feedback we take. A lot of the feedback we received after the 21 IRP was to incorporate climate change, which was a lot of great work went into that. Exploring alternative fuels, adding the IRA, which was new, that came in the middle of our planning process. So we worked with what we could do in the middle of our process. We added the electrification analysis. Excuse me, need to get some water. And we also looked at kind of a no growth scenarios on the gas side. So this is trying to account for some of the new policies that had come in last year. Also in the middle of our planning process, we couldn't get everything in. So we looked at kind of some stand-in no growth policy or no growth scenarios that could look like that and what that would do for the gas system as well. And we looked at meeting the kind of the state energy strategy. So this is a decarbonization strategy trying to lower the emissions for the state and how that might look on the gas system too. I think next slide. That was the end of slides.
Well, thank you.